And good morning. Once again, we're in the month of May for the first time. Today is May 7th. So welcome, and you guys, thanks for joining in with our ongoing. It is definitely an ongoing study of the Gospel of John. Today we're going to be looking at one verse, verse 6 in chapter 18, and I've entitled this session The Door or A Door. And I gotta, let's see, share this. A door. So last time, fellas, I took the liberty um, to draw a correlation between how the arresting party are viewing this situation with their agenda coming to overcome. They have identified, from my perspective, a scapegoat. The whole idea is if we can find, or if they can find blame in someone or something, then they can bring the nation together. What the Jewish community under the rule of Rome during the first century, what they don't want is an uprising. So if they can establish and maintain the peace, that's everything. And Jesus is their object to arrest and convict for his alleged crimes, which are hard to pin down. But what I did is I took the liberty that saying that what is true of these guys is actually true of us as humans, in that we need a winner. We are kind of geared this way as people, that we need the right beliefs. We need to follow the right people. We need, in our Christian communities, go to the right church. Not so much at our age. We've kind of worked through a lot of that. But in a human society, it's important to be on the right team, on a winning team, however we define it. And the reason is because then, if we can identify with the winner, however we define it, we can then define a loser. And I'm proposing that what is true within the first century is a reflection of what is true of human nature, this idea that we tend to seek an enemy. And the reason is because of an innate need to be perceived as on the winning team. Now that's a very quick overview, but I made that correlation. It's not in the text, but I thought it was an interesting idea. Then we talked about it. Today, we're going to, it's not really moving on. We're actually looking at part B. This text reads, they answered him, the arresting party. They said, Jesus said, who do you seek? And he said, they answered, Jesus the Nazarene. He said to them, I am he. I think we all know, we did a deep dive into the I am last week. And I think we all understand the he was added, the I am, and we looked at it through Dave Brown's paper, it's actually posted on the website now. And Judas also, who was betraying him, in the process of betraying him, was standing with them. When therefore he said to them, I am he, they drew back and they fell to the ground. So this is what we want to focus in on, is this very act here of what occurred, or this action. So the overview today goes like this. We know that Jesus is present within the garden. It's at night with his disciples, and Judas is leading this entourage towards the person of Jesus. And joining Jesus is the Roman cohort, the officers from the priest, right here, and the officers from the Pharisees. That's from the text. They are all outfitted with lanterns, torches, and weapons to apprehend the suspect. What that is saying to us is they are really well equipped right here. And then that leads us to Jesus's expression of a personal positive identification, and they all drew back and fell to the ground. Last week there was some discussion: are they on their face or on their back? And I kind of just let that go, and uh, I don't really know. I'm looking at it as they were knocked backwards, but that may or may not be the case. I don't know. So here is a second way to, rather than an application of force that is part of being human, applying force towards an enemy, we're going to look at this from a different perspective. And you guys, Jeff last week, John, you guys have already talked about this, so it's not going to be any huge eye-opening experience, but there's a different way to look at this. So what we know to be true so far is we know that when Jesus states ego eimi, I am, he's that ego eimi is the Greek term. He is stating what is true at this moment in the garden to and for this mixed crowd of people. They're all over the map, primarily against, but there are his disciples present. So we have a mixture of belief systems within this group. It's a mixed crowd. Motives are primarily focused for his apprehension, but we also have the disciples present with him. And I'm looking at this now from Jesus' perspective, from the Word becoming flesh, as in John 1. So we're looking at it from a theological perspective. And what I'm suggesting, there's more going on than what we see in the scene. Jesus is their creator, regardless of their beliefs at this any given moment. We got the guys who are for and the guys who are against. And he's also their sustainer, as we talked about last week. He is upholding all things by the word of his power. He holds all things together. Colossians chapter 1. This is true. From our perspective, being in the faith of Christianity, this is true, that he not only created all things, but he's at every given moment holding all things together. His love, Jesus' love for each, was true at their creation. Now, this is flowing out of my head. I think my belief is that God is a God of love. God is love. And creation is an act of love. Creation flows out of love, not the other way around. He thought of you, he thought of me, he thought of every human being as a uniquely designed and created individual, and Jesus, in a Jesus kind of way, well, it's actually the Word. The Word becoming flesh is Jesus. He spoke us into existence, and at any given moment, my ability or my mode of living is up to him, allowing it and sustaining it at that moment. His love for each was true at their creation and is true at this current moment, because each person there, regardless of their beliefs, exists uniquely and individually through his hands. That is my statement of opinion, and I'm basing that on how I understand the Bible and the New Testament. So we're going to go back and illustrate this through our diagram that I've already introduced. And and representing from the quantum physics perspective. I mean, this is just an illustration describing something in the spiritual realm. So at any given moment, you and I have a current state. We have a current state right now. We're in you're hearing my voice, you're absorbing what I'm attempting to say. And so we live in a current moment. Their current moment was that all are from Jesus. Those present are from Jesus and connected to Jesus through creation. This has nothing to do, I am asking your patience here, nothing to do with our belief on a second birth. I believe all of creation, my opinion is that all of creation is connected to the person of Jesus through creation. He thought of them, he loved them, he thought of them, and he created them. All present are being sustained in this very moment by Jesus because all are an expression of his love. And this is the quantum idea of entanglement, that there is a physical connection, and quantum physics, this has been verified. I mean, nobody needs to try to prove this at the scientific level. It exists. And I'm saying, in a real spiritual sense, all humans are connected to Jesus through creation. There is a connection from God to us. Whether we recognize it or not is immaterial at this point. But we were loved, we were thought of, we were loved, and we were created. And so there is a connection to Jesus, and Jesus is connected to them. So within our model of quantum reality, there's a current state and there's a future possibility. We talked about this. We've talked about it a couple times, but if we kind of remove the quantum diagram for a minute, you and I know that at any given moment, there are possibilities regarding how I respond. If I respond I can respond in a me-oriented P1, in a negative state through anger, blame, violence. Those are poor responses. They're poor responsibilities, and they would be poor choices. We talk about good choices and poor choices, and but those choices are not in existence yet until we make that choice. On the other hand, there are better choices, the P6s and the P7s. And bear with me for my simplistic analogy here, but to get the point across is that not all choices are equal. There are poor choices, and there are the P1s, the lower numbers, and there are better choices. And as we looked at last week or 2 weeks ago, the greatest of choices is love, from 1 Corinthians 13. So I'm kind of making that correlation there. This whole idea of current state and future possibility is in the quantum world called superposition. That means that those possibilities are not in existence yet until the observer chooses. And we know that to be true in our life. If I, out of anger, respond to my spouse in a way that is not very good or smart, that's a poor choice. But in the heat of the moment, it's better to call a timeout in order to make a better choice. It may not always be harmony, but at least a better choice. So within, there's a whole spectrum of choices. It's not infinite. There are a specific number of choices, but there are multiple choices. So now we have the observer coming in with the eyeglasses. Now this is where I'm going with this is Jesus, when he says, I am, he is inducing as the observer a choice. And we're going to look at what happens through that choice. So Jesus is there on the scene and he is listening to what they're saying and he makes his choice. He goes around and he chooses P7 from my perspective. He chooses the big one. And not to knock him over, but he's choosing the greatest. Now, this is me from my perspective. I think he's choosing the greatest possibility, the one that is fueled by love. When Jesus chooses P7, it affects all because all are connected to Jesus through creation. That's the point I want you to get. There is a physical connection here through what in the quantum world called entanglement. We are created beings, and therefore we are connected to by our existence to the Creator. On a smaller scale, our choices that we make influence or change those connected to us. So when I make my choice, it has effect. I mean, I can't go back. And this is illustrated by this. The P7, whatever my choice is, now becomes my current state. And my entire current state moves forward. This is where if, that the waveform collapses, but it becomes part of my current state. This is where forgiveness comes in. I can't go back and redo it. All I can do is forgive the past. And so here is current state, a new current state. So when Jesus states, this is my application. When Jesus states, I am, he's stating the greatest possibility from my perspective, not the one intended to bowl them over in power. That's not the point. The point is something greater fueled by love, and that's my interpretation. The waveform collapses, as we see, and from my again, I'm really apologetic over this whole thing because this is out of my head, guys, and you can do with it what you want. I'm not saying this is the way it is. No one really knows here what went on. From my perspective, through his choice, Jesus's choice, I am, all present are brought into a momentary state of absolute clarity. This is what I think happens. There's no proof in the text at all, but I think something happened to these guys. And I think what happened is a moment of absolute clarity. And we're going to talk about what I mean. And what clarity is they had a door that opened for a moment and they saw reality as it really exists, not the cloaking and what they've created in their head, but there's way more to it than that. Vince, you talked about the thin veil between us and heaven. Well, and as another dimension, they saw into, in my opinion, into an entirely different dimension. And so why I think this moment was fueled by the greatest love is that Jesus his intent is not to knock them over in power, to show them I have a bigger stick than you. His point was revelation, to show them what actually exists. That's my perspective. And you guys, John hit on it, Jeff hit on it last week. So what this means, again, from my perspective, within this moment that these guys are being knocked over, and I believe it's entirely motivated by love, because that's how I understand the person of Jesus. I believe when Jesus acts, he's showing us at that moment what love looks like. Jesus reveals what is actually true, the revelation, for all and to all who are present. It's like they get a special ride. A door is open, and during time, and I call it absolute clarity. Two things occur. This is actually, guys, a window or a door. I did not change the metaphor. This is how I'm thinking more and more about what judgment is, what judgment will be. Judgment exists, but what it will look like. So this is just, I don't have it all formulated, and I'm not alone, but this is kind of where my mind is going, and I share it with you. Um, so in this moment of clarity that they're brought into, um, they didn't ask for it. There's number one, first of all, there's a removal. And what is removed are the filters, the lenses. In our book, Birth Not Behavior, it's the governors. That the assumption there is that all of us have built filters, and filters have been given to us on how we see reality. Governors in our belief systems on how we operate. And those governors affect what we do, what we say, and what we think. So whether we use the term filters, lenses, or governors, they're all the same of these devices that influence how you and I think at any given time. All of this is removed, and that's a gift. You and I go through it. It could be a very disturbing gift, but it's a gift because it gives us the opportunity to see. Or as will be, okay, so Paul expressed this idea. Give a biblical example. Remember when his eyes, his scales fell off. Saul, actually, I should have Saul there.
Thank you.
His scales fell off his eyes, so he saw clearly. And or another example is how I perceive all humanity. Every human being is going to bow their knee before Christ, and we will see him as he really is. There is no, at this moment, there is no self-created perceptions. All of that's gone because it's removed. Remember J 1 through 10, how the Jesus that I've created in my head no longer is valid. It doesn't exist. And your version of Jesus, G 1 through 10, none of this even means anything because all of the filters have been removed. Again, I'm kind of letting you in on how I'm thinking about judgment. This then gives way to absolute unhindered clarity. Once all of the hindrances are removed, I can see things as they really are. And I think that's the gift that was given to these guys. They didn't go into an illusion. Illusion is less real. A clarity is more real. They move from less real to more real, not from more real to less real. A door opens, and for a moment, these guys are changed. Now, we'll talk about aftermath next week. Or in 2 weeks, rather. I'll be gone next week. For a moment, they are changed. They are changed. All see what is true. They see him as he is. They see themselves as they are. They see the connection with all which exists, because all are created through the Word. They get a glimpse. Within clarity, and I think of that as a gift. Within clarity, one is face to face. What this is like, from my perspective, we become face to face with what they have done. They've come face to face with what they have done, how they've treated each other, uh, I mean, they are completely bare in a sense, and there's no cloaking that is even possible. So clarity means a grasping of what I am a part of, an adherence to, and seeing what really exists. And it's also of how I have lived my life, the choices of the choices that I have made in how I have lived as a human being on this earth. And I think, from my mind, my perspective, that's what this, they got a mini glimpse of what is actually true. And I think there's correlations to us of how to think about judgment in the future. That's again from me. As human frailty is brought, is my summary statement. Whoop. As human frailty is brought into absolute clarity, that's what we see happening. Resistance does not exist. It it just it dissipates. And the only response is an involuntary response to fall back and receive what is true. They didn't decide, oh, we'll now fall back. They fell back because it was an involuntary response and a picture of human frailty coming into direct connection with what actually exists. That's how I understand it. So, an illustration, and I'd like you to imagine with me, just use nobody knows here, but we're going to use our imagination. Remember, last week we used this slide of Jesus saying, I am He, and then a force came over these, an applied force. And I'm illustrating this in a converse sense, in a contrasting way to see this. Yes, the result is the same. They're on their backs, or Jeff, excuse me, they're on their face forward. I don't know, but just for sake of illustration, think of first of all as a doorway, and here is the doorway. A doorway is open. We're using our imagination. And what is revealed, the point is not a vine, but the point is something entirely different. This is out of their realm. What would have been the same if I was illustrating this? What would be the same as, no, they're people with halos. That's how our artistry depicted something different, a different realm, but yet connecting it to human experience. We'll just put a halo on them. I'm not going halos. I chose an image that was entirely different. It represents growth, it represents fruitfulness, it's alive, and there's a central location within this illustration. And it happens to be a biblical. Jesus used, I am the vine and you are the branches. So that's where I'm showing this. So at that moment, they get knocked over and a doorway opens, and now they see existence entirely from a different perspective. What actually exists, and this is my comment, is very different. I realize I exist, and they can make this connection. They get it. I exist, they're thinking, in relation with something alive and wonderful. That's the overall overarching idea of the vine, is that it's alive and it's wonderful. Now, I'm doing some animation here, and notice how the vine is actually changing. The vine represents movement forward and growth. The vine is alive. The vine is flourishing because He is the vine. He is the creator of all things. And I am a branch within that. Now, again, we're setting aside personal belief here at a moment, but they, regardless of their beliefs, this is true of them from a creation reality. They were created and they're part of this. And it's all fueled by the fact that the very one who created, loved them, and created them is standing right there. And he has given them at this moment this gift. And we're imagining what this gift was. So, looking at it again, there's a third movement. And that third movement is the vine even becomes more flourishing. And now instead of one cluster of grapes, there are two. There's movement towards life because the scriptures tell us that all things were created by him, and through him all things hold together. And the crowd, regardless of their belief system, they get it at this moment. They see this entirely different, and they're able to connect themselves to what they see. That's what clarity is about. Finally, the last movement is a focus in on the cluster, one cluster of grapes, and they see those grapes differently. They see fruitfulness, yes, but what they see is a connection to being human, and that all things are being held within his hands, the one who is the vine. And there's a twisting of metaphors here. But I chose that verse out of Acts 17:28 to illustrate this last movement. And this last movement is, for in him, Christ, we live and move and have our being. That is true regardless of a person's belief. They are living because Jesus is sustaining that individual. Where their head is in relation to that, their ability to recognize that at the moment is out there. It's in question. But from the God perspective, the one that they are coming to arrest is the one who is holding them together at that very moment. And this is a picture, a micro picture of the incarnation happening right before our eyes. It's an illustration of what this is about and what he is about to do. So, thinking about this, for a moment, all present within that scene, in that garden, were transported. I use the word transported because I can't think of a better word, into an entirely different dimension, Vince. That's what we talked about earlier. I mean, something wild happened. And again, bear with me. You would think that would have an effect on them. They would wake up being different people. We don't see that, and we'll talk about that. The arresting party arrived at night, we know that, fully armed and fully aware of what they needed to accomplish. They had a mission. Thus, human nature. They're full of confidence, occupying their mind as they made their approach. We're going to go get him, and we're going to arrest him. But at the moment Jesus said, I am he, or I am, it's like the air pressure in that garden changed dramatically. It's like if someone opened a door into a whole nother realm. The change came upon them. They're not making decisions, they're only responding. It enveloped them, this change, just like being in a place where the air pressure dramatically increases or dramatically drops. Control does not exist. It is a moot point. It's like an abrupt wake up to the reality I'm in the headlights of an oncoming train. It is terrifying. That's what I'm trying to get across, is that this was a terrifying and revelatory moment for these guys. and I'm assuming they're all men. Suddenly, they found themselves no longer standing in front of a man to arrest their agenda, but they were transported to a realm which is entirely different than mine. Their involuntary response was the body falling back. They had no choice because they were brought into absolute clarity. The only the only thing we have from the text is, and they fell back. And so I'm building a whole story based on that idea why. And so please accept it from that, you know, from that sense. So table time. John 18:6 represents, and we're going to have a pretty interesting discussion here because I'd really like to hear your thoughts. I'm going to ask a question, your thoughts on this, because it's up for grabs. John 18:6 represents a moment when infinite divine possibility, the P1 through 7, collapses into a single irreversible moment of truth. And I think that was fueled by love, because God is love, Jesus is love. All present participate because all are connected. The quantum word is entangled through existence. There is a creator and a creation, and there is a connection, a relationship that is there through creation. Jesus, fully aware of this relationship, chooses the best possibility, and that is the one fueled by love, not by law. 1 Corinthians 13, the greatest is love. When truth is revealed, as it is here, truth meaning what is actually true, when love becomes fully present, just like we see here, something always falls. And those things, for example, ego. There is no ego. Fear. I'm where it is. I'm there. Power. There's no such thing. And illusion. The filters fall. All of these things fall when absolute truth and love are fully present within that moment. N.T. Wright, I like N.T. Wright. I think we all do. And so, Bill, I pulled this from N.T. Wright, and he says it is basic New Testament Christology. That's the study of Christ, that the human Jesus discloses in himself the being and the nature of the true God. I really adhere to that, Bill, because I want to believe, so I'm biased, that the person of Jesus tells us a lot of what God is like, or maybe better, what I need to know. And that's what he's saying. And that we see that right here. Therefore, what we see through Jesus is what God is like. And that's my logical connection. And when this occurs, there's two possibilities. We see Jesus acting. We've built a story of what these men could have experienced within that moment, of coming face to face with what is actually true. And it's representative in a microcosm, a micro view of what judgment could look like in the future for all humanity at the when every knee shall bow, and when he is fully revealed, when there's several metaphors describing that Jesus plans, from my perspective, to restore. And there's different views of that. And I'm going to throw out two possibilities. Some say that in the end, when I'm brought into a place of absolute clarity, like I've attempted to illustrate, that I can't remember which one I put forward. Some say that in the end, human nature can resist in receiving the love of God. That's where, the book by Divine, no, not Divine, The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. His position was that in the end, either God says, "Thy will be done," or I say, "God, Thy will be done," and we make a choice. And at that ending moment, we either go left or right. Um, and depending on choice, and that the assumption of that is that human nature can resist in receiving the love of God. That's that choice. Others say that human frailty entirely collapses within that moment of absolute clarity, that there is no resistance. I alluded to that earlier. And this is a really this is a huge question. And, but that in the ultimate end, resistance is conquered by God's love. That, in a sense, I think, Bill, you brought up last week some idea that every knee shall bow in gladness and happiness is one interpretation. And so it really is contingent upon what one's view of human nature. In the end, do we have free choice? And can we say, "Sorry, God, I don't want to go to your heaven"? And as C.S. Lewis would say, "Well, you make your choice." And he wrote a book about what that would look like. I do think C.S. Lewis wrote that book from a perspective of the hell as a restorative experience that these people had, that they went through. That's how the book is written. That there is a purpose for hell, and that's restoration, based on the idea that all things are to be reconciled. Others say that, that's how could a human created, fragile human being, when when brought entirely into clarity, resist the very God who loves them? It's a valid question, and I can't give you the answer. I just know the question. So I'd like to know what you guys think. And what are your thoughts on this question? And it has to do with human nature. And everything's legal here, fellas. So don't no fear here. We're all on a journey together, and we're looking at this. So what do you guys think?
Are you baiting me?
No, not at all am I baiting you. No, I think these are, and we're not going to figure it out here, but
No.
hopefully it helps us think about, you know, you know,
Well, two things quickly.
yeah,
On that every knee shall bow, I got to go back and find the word study on that. The guy said that word. There's a Greek word in there that as as interpreted generally, it doesn't have to have a subjective interpretation. It's a it's a positive response. It's a choice.
yeah,
People do it. Okay. Now, I looked at that when they saw this vine there. I looked at that, and the first thing that came to my mind was purgatory. That
yeah. Well, that's what it,
these are mental creations to try to understand God. But purgatory, created by the Catholic Church before there was a Reformation, was a place where you encountered God and basically were purified. I mean,
yeah,
you like these people fell back, they saw God, but you had nowhere to go, and
right.
you had to face the fact that God is love, and who are you? How did you fall short? And all these self recriminations that you had to make peace with. and that eventually you come to God. And in a way, it was universal salvation. George MacDonald agreed with that, and Pope Benedict disagreed with purgatory as a training camp idea. He thought of that transformation happening the instant you saw Jesus, that things were just burned away. So
Yeah.
those are just my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
posted some.
what do you think, Bill? Where is your mind right now on this?
Love wins.
Oh, did you read his book?
Yeah, and love wins. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't believe this is my thing. I'm not a
You're
Calvinist.
mentioning Rob Bell's book, Love Wins,
Yeah, but
which, by
you
the way,
can't
you got
believe
ostracized for.
God created us. God created us not just at the beginning. He creates us every time we're born out of a woman. We're created.
Yeah.
And it's a biological thing, but God knows every one of us. He knows everything about us. And knowing that God is love, I can't believe He created us for the purpose of falling and demonstrating His love by going to hell. I go no,
Yeah.
that's a pretty malevolent view of God. So if He created
Yeah.
us, He
Yeah.
created us for something good. Now
It,
all this is speculation.
yeah. I mean, yeah. And thank you for telling us how you really think. Um, I watched a documentary on Dante's, not the Towering Inferno, but in the Inferno. Um, I forget the name, but it's where we get our image. It's where the Protestant church gets a lot of the imagery of hell. And what I didn't know is that in that I've never read his book, but I read well, it was I didn't read it. It was a documentary, and I did not know this, but in Dante's drawing or his artwork of the painting of the Inferno, it has a restorative element built in. There is a movement through, and people have to go through this suffering in order to get somewhere, to learn, which I didn't know that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Other thoughts, fellas? What do you guys, Bill has landed on the fact that where he is right now, love wins. And what are some of the rest of you? And it's way okay to have a different approach. I mean, we're all kind of wondering about this.
I think for me, Mike, and I have a question because the two questions at the bottom here um, are based on the premise that everyone sees clearly who God is.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is based on that premise.
So my question is there a possibility that because of sin in our lives, because of the work of Satan, that some people never see clearly who God is? I mean, how do you explain what happened after the arrest with Christ's crucifixion? Because some people in there, and maybe even some of the ones at the arrest, either saw clearly and rejected it or didn't ever see clearly who Jesus was. Therefore, their response was negative. So I believe that God shows love to everything He's created, but we respond. And some people respond by saying, I don't care if you
Oh
love me.
yeah,
I'm going to live however I want, and whatever happens, happens. So they may even have an opportunity to see clearly who God is, but their choice is that means nothing to me, or I reject that. So I believe that there is a resistance or a rejection from some people, even if they see it clearly, but there's maybe even a possibility that some people never see clearly who Christ is and who God is, therefore.
yeah. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. Other thoughts, fellas? And John, no fair asking me because we want to hear from each other. I tend to land on the love win side, so I'll just tell you. But it's a big question. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
and
yeah.
Jeff, I'll just say the assumptions here, yeah, there are assumptions. The assumptions are based on and every knee shall bow and every tongue confess. And we're talking about the ultimate end, post life decisions. We're not talking about we're not talking about what I do with Christ in this life. We're saying at the end, when we all go into his presence, what that will be like. So that is the assumption there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question then is, does my at the end, when every knee shall bow and everybody confess, does that at that point does that determine a destination? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. It does. I mean, that's a great
I
question
mean,
because
I might bow down on my way to hell, realizing I've taken the wrong turn.
and that's one valid interpretation is that everyone is forced to bow. Some will say, okay, you bowed, now you go right and you go left.
Yeah.
And that is one valid, but there are other ways to look at it too. So a hand, Totsi, yeah.
I am an example of what Jeff is talking about. Uh, I, you know, the only thing that brought me to the Lord was at age 55, I was fired in Maine. And I don't know whether, all of the things of being professionally uh, uh, successful or whatever up to that point would have continued to keep me away from the Lord if I didn't wasn't fired in Maine.
Right.
So I agree with Jeff. It's not everyone comes to that, and if I wasn't ever fired, maybe I would have never come to the Lord.
Yeah.
Who
So
knows?
that, yeah, that's the gift. Yeah. The severe gift. Yeah. Thank you, Totsi. Yeah. Thanks for stepping in there. Other thoughts, fellas? Carl, are you guys in? Yeah. Just anybody.
So
And there is no right answer here. We're talking. Yeah. John, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. So Billy Graham was interviewed once on well, he was interviewed a lot, but one time on TV, they asked him either specifically about somebody else or, what happens? Is that guy gone to heaven or hell? And you would think Billy Graham would be able to make a judgment on that. But he kind of just turned around quickly and he said, "That's above my pay grade." And which I, which I, I remember. I don't know why, but it's
Yeah.
so the things that where you were talking about a door opening, another realm, right? This and all this stuff, and then you get to the end. Now we're in conjecture. We're talking about what happens
Yeah.
at the end, as if we would know. And but on the other side of that fence, you keep talking about God as love, which he is, but
Yeah.
my one thought to that is he anything else besides love? Is there anything more? So do you wake up every day and everything in your brain, mind, and everything you do in your 8 hour day is love, 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 right? Or is there just other things? Is life more than love, so to speak? But anyway, I would up until the end here, right, that these filters and things that we would see now and then our exposure to reality, I would just go back and say, so what did Jesus say? And if we read only his response to things in love, I think I think we don't read things in love. So we need more of that. We need to understand
Yeah.
more of that for starters. But on the other side of the fence, often he'll say in the parables, here's the good news, here's the bad news, you choose. You people think you're all the good guys, but I got news for you, right? These other people are ahead of you in line here. And then, I
Right.
mean, all kinds of questions. We tend to read what we want to read and hear what we want to hear,
Absolutely.
and we see it through our lens. And so I think if we only see it through this lens, we miss a whole lot of what Jesus was saying, that our journey, our life, this is serious business. Little choices are a big thing. And this idea of sin Jeff brought up, what clouds our lens, life is serious. Um, so what we do and respond and think, we don't need to have it all. We were talking originally, Vince brought up the idea of these demonic and evil forces and things like that. We don't need to have it all figured out. That's not the part. It's interesting to think about it now and then, but the reality when the rubber hits the road is something else. And how it's just not a belief system about Jesus, but Jesus would often say, he who has eyes to see, ears to hear, let him hear. And he was trying to explain to them the vine tree, I'm the vine, you're the branches. And we think that's all copacetic till we read the part about where, the vine dresser comes and cuts down some of the branches, and those branches get put in the fire. And it's like, what? We don't like that part. Okay, we'll leave that out. Let's move on. Right. But he does it all the time. He says all the time, this is serious stuff. And we get to choose what we want to do with it.
I think you're sharing yet a little different twist on the perspective. Yeah, love's important, and you would say that, but there's also other aspects of God that we need to consider, and that is certainly valid. To me, the reason I wrote this last slide is because of what happens, these guys being knocked back involuntarily, and is that grace acting on human frailty? So that's where my mind went. But I am no way interested in tickling our theological fancies. That is so far off my radar. But I do believe that what we do think about God, the nature of God, of which we're talking here, has everything to do with how I treat people. And how I treat people is an absolute reflection on what I think of God. So as I delve into these kinds of thoughts, it may have it has the potential to have a huge impact on how I treat um, Martha at the checkout line in Lucky's and how I see Martha.
Mm.
So, Bill, and then actually, Bill, you're not Ginger, you're Carl, and you're
Yeah,
Carl.
sorry.
You've got something going on there, but
Go for it,
Yeah,
Carl.
share with us
Go
what
for
your
it.
thought is.
I'm coming in on her iPad. I just had thought my mind ran to the temple when Jesus went in and tipped over the money changer's table. And I would just ask the question to myself or to all of us, has Jesus tipped over your table?
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Carl. I
Yeah,
hope you heal up
just,
there, whatever that
just
is.
yeah.
And Bill, you had a comment.
Well, I'm in agreement with Jeff and John too. It's just a different. We're talking about post-mortem events, and that's all we know
Yeah.
nothing about that, But we're
Yeah.
saying that um, I have sin in my life. I think I have less than I used to, but I have it,
Yeah.
and I'm going to go into this redeemed, resurrected world, and if I take that in with me, I'm going to pollute it. I'm not welcome there. So something's got to happen to me. And this is what I'm talking about. The fire of God, I don't think it's punitive. When you see fire, it's not punitive. It's usually in a sense of cleansing. And it's not pleasant,
Yeah.
but the point of it isn't to
Yeah.
punish you, it's to redeem you. So that's my thinking, that you get there eventually, but not because your sins are being ignored or you're being, that was then and this is now. No, there's a process in here somewhere. And that's the only thing I land on, to come to the point where every knee gladly bows. every tongue
Yeah,
confesses.
and what you're saying there is that in no way you minimize the idea of judgment and sin. No way. But how do we look at those things is what you're pointing to there. Fellas, it's 8 o'clock. And
Nuts.
thanks once again. I know I not purposely went to the edge of the deep dive this time, but and no agenda other than what is in the text of what is happening to these guys, and maybe a way we could fill in the blanks and understand it. Maybe, maybe not. I'll submit that to you. Next week, I'm going to be gone. I'm actually going to be with my youngest daughter, Annie, which I'm really excited about. We're going down to her place near Gunnison and help her and Eli, her husband, do some stuff. And then I'll be back here on the 21st and we'll pick up with week 232. There is no C. We're going to go to 232. So, and I've really been having fun with this. So we'll see you in a few weeks, fellas. And thank you all for your thoughts. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
Mike.
Mike.
Yeah, bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.